Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything by Joshua Foer. Once upon a time, there was nothing to do with thoughts except remember them. Anything that had to be preserved in memory. Any story that would be retold, any idea that would be transmitted, any piece of information that would be conveyed, first had to be remembered. For this reason, memory was paramount. Back in the day, to remember anything practical was of extreme importance. Knowing where to farm, knowing who your kin was, and anything relating to cultural identity had to be remembered. Religion and cultural traditions were passed down through oral tradition, and these helped distinguish groups and individuals from each other. Once writing was introduced, things began to change. Those with access began externalizing knowledge through books, but this was still very difficult as books were few and hard to come by. But after the printing press, memory began to decline in practical value and cultural importance. Now technology has allowed us to delegate almost all of our knowledge to our phones and other devices. How we get from one place to another is supplied by GPS. Our schedules are announced to us through notifications. Names, dates, even experiences with loved ones are all stored in here. Memorization may feel trivial at this point, but there are still good reasons to remember. It's helpful for academic pursuits, becoming an expert, and making the most out of life. One group that pushes the limits of memorization are those who compete in memory contests. Author Joshua Foer repeated on one such contest, and after a year's journey found himself winning the USA Memory Championship.
The staple of all memory competitions is remembering a deck of cards. Now, the current world record is just over 13 seconds to remember the entire deck with perfect recall. Now, this might seem like an impossible feat only achieved by some stroke of genius, but I can assure you that you all have the capacity to do this as well. To quote Ben Pridmore, who is an ex-world memory champion, anyone can do it. It's just a matter of understanding how our brains work. So our brains don't process information, different types of information equally well. We are quite good at remembering visual imagery, but perform quite poorly when posed with the task of remembering a list of words or a list of numbers, for example. The principal component or idea underlying most memory techniques is quite simple. Convert stimuli that we're bad at remembering into stimuli that we are naturally good at remembering. So this idea is used in the most famous method called the method of loci, or the memory palace as it's known. And this involves creating a vivid image for each stimuli that you're presented with and place it somewhere in 3D space. This form of encoding is multisensory, and therefore it results in strength and consolidation of these memories. So when I'm posed with the challenge of memorizing this deck of cards in order, I'm not simply thinking of numbers or suits. I'm thinking of images in space, and the order in which I traverse this space represents the order of the cards. So for example, take the two of clubs. I'm thinking of Prince on my front porch performing on top of two lily pads that are in the shape of clubs. And as I approach my front door, I'm presented with the devil throwing a trident at a baby Cupid, the six of hearts. Rest assured, these images I'm not going to forget on memory competition day.
The concept of memory palaces helps to demonstrate another key concept from the book, which is the idea that it's not about how long you're practicing, but really how you're practicing. We've probably all heard of the saying that it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill, but Joshua Foer's book helps us to identify how that's actually in fact a myth. It's really about how you're practicing. When we are learning a new skill, we go through 3 different phases: the cognitive stage, the associative stage, and the autonomous stage. All of these stages ultimately leading to a point where the skill becomes automatic until we finally reach this point known as the OK plateau. This is where we really don't see any more improvement beyond what we can do. For example, something like driving, we reach a point where we've driven so much we don't really get that much better as drivers. The OK plateau leads to the question of how anyone ever becomes an expert in anything. Psychologist Anders Ericsson explains the concept of mastery through the concept of deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is where we force ourselves to stay in the cognitive phase, which is where we're treating the skill like we're learning it for the first time. When we're learning a skill for the first time, we're more in tune to all the intricacies of it and can help better fine-tune it. The real key to deliberate practice, however, is the idea of challenging yourself and putting yourself in situations where you know you're going to fail and learning from those mistakes. As college students, we're all hoping to acquire a level of mastery and expertise in different majors. We can practice deliberate practice by enrolling in courses that we know are going to be challenging, or really just putting ourselves in academic situations where we know we might fail in order to give ourselves opportunities to learn from those mistakes.
But what if you could express mastery over something without practicing at all? For some people discussed in the book as savants, it seems that they were born with the innate ability to have great skill in a certain area of expertise with no practice whatsoever. The first savant that the book discussed is named S, just for anonymous reasons. S had the ability to remember long strings of numbers and long strings of words, or really anything, for months or even years at a time, just by having heard them once. S attributes his abilities to the fact that when he thinks of numbers or words, they conjure up images in his mind. And in order to remember these numbers or words, he just places the images that they conjure up in a sort of memory palace that he has, which is usually a street. Whenever he wishes to remember what it is he's supposed to remember, he just goes back to the street and walks along it and sees what images are there. Another savant that the book discusses is Daniel, who made headlines for being able to memorize 22,000 digits of pi, being able to learn Spanish in just about a week, and also for being able to do complex multiplication and division lightning fast. Daniel claimed to be a synesthesiac, but during Ford's interview, it became apparent that actually he was just a person pretending to be a synesthesiac that was extremely skilled in memory. While Daniel's story may have been debunked, it still seemed to amaze Ford that he was able to perform all his amazing feats despite the fact that he was just a regular person. That seems to be the main take-home message of this book, that even though it's great to think that there are savants out there born with the innate ability to just do anything that they put their mind to, the truth is that the only thing differentiating them from us is some good old-fashioned deliberate practice. So who is this book for? In our opinion, it seems good for students, academics, educators, and anyone who seeks to learn more about the brain.
We are now going to show you a series of images. Some of these images were shown to you in the beginning of the video. Some were not. See how many you can recall that were actually shown to you beforehand.